Welcome to Hood Politics. In this episode, I will be discussing the story of Roberto Lopez Jr. The facts of the case are as follows. On Tuesday, January 13th, 2009, at around 3 p.m., a group of men were playing football on Bixel Street near Echo Park. At around 4:25 p.m., a red Toyota Scion drove down the street at 40 miles per hour. Someone yelled, "Slow the fuck down," and someone else yelled, "Shoot that fool." One of the men then pulled a gun, ran into the middle of the street, and opened fire on the Scion multiple times. The car then turned west on Court Street and sped away. The area was in chaos as people ran and ducked for cover. The gunman and the group he was playing football with fled the scene. Neighbors started coming out of their homes to see what was going on and discovered a tragedy. A 4-year-old boy named Roberto Lopez Jr. was lying on the sidewalk. He had been shot in the chest. Roberto had been walking to a nearby community home with his 6-year-old sister Janet and their cousins when the shooting started, and he collapsed on the sidewalk just outside of the home. 911 was called and police and paramedics arrived at the scene. They found Roberto on the ground, being held by 2 people. He wasn't conscious or breathing. The bullet entered his chest and exited through his back, resulting in a lot of blood loss. He was transported to the hospital where doctors attempted to help him, but sadly, there was nothing they could do. And a few minutes later, Roberto Lopez Jr. was pronounced dead. Detectives arrived at the scene and began their investigation. They found 3 .380 caliber bullet casings on the street, and they found 2 fired bullets near the sidewalk where Roberto was shot. One of the bullets had his DNA on it, and investigators concluded it was the bullet that killed him. Roberto enjoyed playing video games, and he loved dancing. He was known for putting on his cowboy boots and sombrero and dancing around the house and at parties. A month prior to the shooting, he had just celebrated his 4th birthday, and his family threw a huge party for him, and people from all over the neighborhood showed up. Roberto came from a large, tight-knit family that was well known in the neighborhood. 3 generations of his family lived side by side in 2 duplexes on Court Street, next door to the community home. There was Seraphin and his wife, their 3 adult children and their spouses, and 6 grandchildren. Roberto's mother, Araceli, sold clothes at local swap meets, and his father, Roberto Sr., was a construction worker. The couple were expecting another child, and Araceli was in the late stages of pregnancy when Roberto was killed, and she gave birth to his little brother Yair just a few weeks later. At around 4:30 on the day of the shooting, the family was preparing to have dinner when they heard popping noises in the distance. They didn't think much of it until a few seconds later, one of Roberto's cousins ran in the house screaming, "They hit Roberto! They hit Roberto!" The family thought she was referring to a game they were playing, but then she started crying and said, "There's blood in his mouth." Seraphin and the others ran outside and saw Roberto lying on the ground. Seraphin healed him and lifted his head. He removed the blood from his mouth so he wouldn't choke. A few minutes later, police and paramedics arrived and transported Roberto to the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. The next day, people from all over the area gathered at the community home. The home was a part of the Art, Community, Land Activism Organization, or ACLA for short. The organization was founded in 1992 by a woman named Trisha Ward and was meant to help change communities through art, landscape design, community organizing, education, mentorship, and youth development. In an area that had been plagued by drugs and violence for decades, the home was a welcome addition to the neighborhood, and it helped keep kids off the streets by offering them positive alternatives. Neighbors built a memorial on the sidewalk in front of the home and brought flowers, candles, and toys in memory of Roberto. The owner of a nearby market named Edgar said the neighborhood would take care of the family and make sure they have everything they need during this moment. Roberto Sr. stepped out of the house and walked over to the memorial and placed Roberto's Incredible Hulk and Power Ranger toys next to the candles. He stated, "I just want this to stop. Can't this just stop?" Araceli said, "My son was only 4 years old. He was innocent." She then pleaded with police to find the killer. LAPD Assistant Chief Earl Pasinger said, "The department is throwing everything they have at the investigation." In the following days, police began receiving numerous tips about the shooting. They were told that the Diamond Street gang was responsible. Diamond Street is one of the oldest gangs in Los Angeles and date back to the early 1900s. They formed on Diamond Street near Figueroa Street, but after the construction of the 110 freeway, the neighborhood was destroyed, and in the following years, the residential area was torn down and replaced with high-rise office buildings. The gang then settled west of the 110 in the area around Bixel Street and have been there since. Investigators were taken aback by the amount of tips they received about the shooting. The community usually kept quiet when it came to gang-related issues out of fear of retaliation, but the death of a 4-year-old boy struck a nerve. Detectives then learned the name of the shooter. He was a 25-year-old Diamond Street member named Howard Astorga, who went by the nicknames Dopey and Doper. Howard had a long rap sheet and was first arrested at the age of 10. He spent a large portion of his life behind bars for things like assault with a firearm, burglary, grand theft auto, drugs, and numerous other offenses. In fact, he had just been released from custody in June of 2008 and was on parole at the time of the shooting. A few days after the shooting, on Thursday, January 15th, officers stopped a car in the nearby city of Monterey Park. After running the names of the driver and passenger, they found that it was Howard and his wife. Howard was then arrested for suspicion of murder, and his wife was arrested for a probation violation. After searching the car, investigators found a picture of Howard's wife throwing up Diamond Street gang signs. Afterwards, they searched his home and found a backpack with Diamond Street graffiti written on it. They also found a baseball cap with the letter D on it and numerous pictures of well-known Diamond Street members. Detectives then questioned Howard about the shooting. Initially, he denied knowing anything about the shooting and said he wasn't on Bixel Street that day. But after investigators told him they had witnesses that saw him shoot at the car, he decided to tell the truth. Howard said on the day of the shooting, he and a few others were playing football on Bixel Street when 2 men in a red Scion came speeding down the street. As they drove past, he yelled "slow down," and the car started driving even faster. As the Scion drove towards Court Street, Howard pulled out a pistol and shot at the car multiple times. He said 3 shots hit the car, and maybe one of the bullets went somewhere else. Howard said he couldn't remember if the gun was a revolver or a semi-automatic. Investigators asked Howard if he shot at the car because he felt they were disrespecting his neighborhood. He told them yes and said he was the only person in the group that shot at the Scion. Howard said at the time of the shooting, he was drunk and on drugs and hadn't slept for 3 days. And after the shooting, he left Bixel Street, and a few minutes later, he saw police and paramedics in the area. He said the following day, he gave the gun to someone and told them to get rid of it. He said he didn't mean to hit Roberto, and it was an accident. Howard was then formally charged with murder for the death of Roberto Lopez Jr., in addition to shooting at an occupied vehicle, as well as gun and gang enhancement charges. His bail was set at $2 million. He later pled not guilty. Investigators notified the family of the arrest. They were relieved and grateful, but were still distraught over Roberto's death. One of his relatives, Juan, stated, "Even though they arrested that guy, that's not going to bring the kid back. He's dead already. No one's going to bring him back." Roberto's funeral was held on Friday, January 23, 2009, at the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels. Hundreds of people attended the service, many wearing shirts with Roberto's picture on them. Roberto's family took to the stage and remembered him as a fun-loving boy that loved to dance. A neighbor named Guadalupe took to the stage and said Roberto's death served as a wake-up call to the community. She stated, "I think people are going to be more conscious of this problem now. We want our neighborhoods to be safe. It could have been my grandchild." The service officiant, Cardinal Roger Mahoney, thanked the attendees for cooperating with police and urged them to reclaim their neighborhoods so their children can play safe. Mahoney stated, "These gang members are nothing more than terrorists. They're an evil. We can bid farewell to Roberto with the promise to make our neighborhoods safe. We must throw these gangs and gang members into the desert or the sea." Araceli's brother, Armando, said his sister has pressed police about more patrols in the neighborhood. He said that's all she wants, and she doesn't want anything to do with the person that killed Roberto. She's leaving that to the justice system. Armando said the family was moved by the outpouring of support. He said people they didn't even know offered them help. Another relative named Nora said it was beautiful to see everyone come out and support the family. She said they had received so much help in the days following Roberto's murder. The trial began in January of 2010. The prosecutor described Howard as a reckless killer with no regard for human life. He said anyone willing to open fire in the middle of a crowded neighborhood for no reason deserves to spend the rest of their life in prison. The prosecutor called numerous witnesses to the stand. One was a woman named Liliana. Liliana testified that on the day of the shooting, she was walking down Bixel Street on her way home from a nearby school. Moments later, she saw Howard pull out a gun and started shooting. Afterwards, he ran by her and ran into an alley. Liliana said she was sure it was Howard because she had known him since elementary school. She described the gun as a black, semi-automatic pistol. Liliana said Diamond Street members attempted to dissuade her from testifying. She said 2 months prior to the trial, someone approached her and put a gun to her head and said, "You're the one that put my cousin Dopey in the pound. If anything happens to Dopey in jail, there will be consequences." Liliana said she was afraid, but knew that testifying was the right thing to do. A 24-year-old man named William also took the stand. William had been playing football with Howard and the others on the day of the shooting. He said at about 4:25, he saw a red car drive down the street and heard someone yell, "Slow the fuck down," and someone else say, "Shoot that fool." William said he saw Howard pull out a gun and shoot at the car 5 or 6 times. He described the gun as a gray or black, semi-automatic pistol. William said after the shooting, everyone ran, but he returned to the area about 5 minutes later and saw a bunch of people surrounding a kid that was lying on the sidewalk. The prosecutor also played the recording of Howard's interview with detectives for the court. He pointed out how Howard admitted that the people in the Scion didn't do anything to him, and he took it upon himself to open fire in the middle of a crowded neighborhood, all because he felt like someone was driving through his territory a little too fast, and they deserved to be killed for it. There was also a debate over whether the shooting was first-degree murder or second-degree murder. The defense said Roberto's death was an accident, and in order for a first-degree murder conviction to make sense, his death would have had to been intentional. The prosecutor said when Howard decided to pull his gun and open fire, his intent was to kill, and that doesn't change just because he didn't kill his intended target. The defense called a man named Martin Flores to the stand. He was the executive director of the Youth Opportunity Movement of Los Angeles. The organization works with the probation department to help incarcerated people transition back into society. The defense felt the gang enhancement charge was unwarranted because the shooting itself wasn't gang related and brought Flores in to speak to their point. Flores told the court that he began community outreach after his younger brother was killed in a drive-by shooting. He said he had worked with numerous gang members over the years and knew the lifestyle very well. He was familiar with Howard and knew that he was a member of Diamond Street. Flores said he didn't believe the shooting was gang-related. He admitted that Howard did act recklessly, but said he didn't do so on behalf of Diamond Street. He said killing a child is frowned upon in the gang world and it wouldn't increase Diamond Street's reputation. During cross-examination, the prosecutor asked Flores, "Does killing a child create fear in the community?" Flores replied yes. He then asked, "Does Diamond Street thrive on fear in the community?" Flores replied yes. The prosecutor said, "A gang's dominance in their territory relies heavily on fear, and if one of their members does something heinous, the gang benefits from it." The prosecution's gang expert during the trial was an LAPD officer named Jonathan Campbell. Campbell told the court about Diamond Street and described them as a very proud gang. He said their primary activities include robberies, drug sales, and murders. Campbell said he believes the shooting was committed in benefit of Diamond Street because it showed that if his members felt disrespected in any way, they will retaliate. He said the fact that Howard was displaying gang tattoos and carrying a gun in the heart of Diamond Street territory meant that he was willing and ready to defend his gang's name, and the fact that he opened fire on a crowded street shows the lengths he would go to for his gang. Campbell said the shooting creates fear in the community, which reinforces Diamond Street's dominance in the neighborhood. Ultimately, on Monday, February 8, 2010, Howard was found guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Roberto Lopez Jr., in addition to shooting at an occupied vehicle, as well as gun and gang enhancement charges. On Thursday, March 18, 2010, Howard Astorga was sentenced to 93 years to life in prison. Roberto's memory lives on through his family, friends, and the neighborhood. He is remembered as a loving boy that was taken way too soon. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Please like, comment, and subscribe.